You know how you trust your home is safe when you're gone? I flew to San Diego for a week-long work conference and left my Anaheim house empty. What my phone cameras showed me changed that forever. My name is Declan Voss, and this is the story of what happened to me last year. I live on Peralta Hills Drive in Anaheim, California. It's a regular neighborhood with houses close together and trees out front. I work in sales and had this week-long conference in San Diego. So I left my house empty. I made sure to lock the front door with a deadbolt and check all the windows before I got in the Uber to the airport. I have 2 indoor blink cameras. One watches the living room and the other covers the kitchen area. I set them up last summer after a break-in down the street. I check the app from my phone occasionally when I'm away. It gives me peace of mind. The first 2 days at the conference were pretty normal. I stayed at a hotel downtown in San Diego. The meetings were long and kind of boring, talking about new products and stuff. At night, I would pull out my phone and open the Blink app. I looked at the live views. Everything was just as I left it. The throw blanket was on the left side of the couch where I always put it. I had left a coffee mug in the sink unwashed from my last cup before I rushed out. I even forgot to take the trash out, so I figured the kitchen would smell a bit when I got back. But that was the least of my worries. The floors in the living room creak a little when the air conditioner kicks on. I remembered that from before I left. On day 3, around 9 p.m., I was back in my hotel room eating some pizza. I opened the Blink app out of habit. I pulled up the living room camera. Everything looked normal. I closed the app and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and opened the app again. I pulled up the motion-triggered clips from overnight. There were none. The system showed no motion detected between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. I thought that was fine for an empty house, but then I switched to the live view. The throw blanket that was on the left side of the couch was now folded neatly on the coffee table. I stared at my phone for a long time. I kept refreshing the view to see if it would change back. It didn't. I sat there trying to figure it out in my head. I hesitated for a bit, then called my neighbor, Lyra Voss. She has a spare key for emergencies. I asked her if she went inside for any reason. She said no. She sounded surprised and told me she had been out of town the whole time visiting her sister in another city. I thanked her and hung up. My mind was going in circles trying to make sense of it. I called the non-emergency line next. They sent officers for a welfare check. They went inside the house and looked around. Later, they called me back and said everything was fine. No sign of forced entry. Doors and windows were secure. I felt a little relieved, but not completely. I decided the wind must have shifted the blanket somehow, even though all windows were locked. Or maybe the AC did it. I tried to push the thought away and focus on the rest of the conference, but I kept thinking about it all day. On day 5, right before I went to bed, I checked the live feed again. The blanket was back on the couch. It was in a different position than it started. And looking at the kitchen camera, the coffee mug I left unwashed in the sink was now clean and sitting upside down on the drying rack. I looked at the screen and said, "What the fuck?" out loud to my empty hotel room. I couldn't believe my eyes. I sat there for a minute, then booked a flight home that night. I left the conference early the next day. I told my boss it was a family emergency. When I got home to Peralta Hills Drive, the house was empty. I walked through every room slowly. Nothing else was touched. No one was ever found. The deadbolt showed no signs of picking. To this day, I cannot explain it. I still live there and check those cameras all the time now, even when I'm home. I listen for the floorboards creaking like they do when the air comes on. Sometimes I wonder who or what moved those things. The not knowing is the worst part. It makes the house feel different now. Some people are afraid of the dark. I used to be afraid of what hides in it. Now I'm afraid of what stands outside your door at 11 p.m. in the light and says absolutely nothing. Me and my wife, Celestine, moved to Dunmore Street in Akron, Ohio in late September. It was a 3-bedroom place, older neighborhood, the kind where everybody has a garden and a flag on the porch. We needed the space. I worked nights at the UPS distribution center. Start at 10, home around 6 in the morning. Celestine works from home doing bookkeeping stuff. We thought it was a good deal, quiet street, nice yard. The neighbor next door, an older guy, maybe mid-60s, waved at us when we pulled up with the moving truck. Seemed fine. The first weird thing Celestine mentioned was small. Like, really small. She said the neighbor, Harwick, that was his name, Harwick Bellamy, kept appearing at his side window whenever she was in the kitchen. Not every time, but enough that she noticed. She told me about it and I kind of brushed it off. Old retired guy, probably bored, probably just timing. I didn't think much of it. Then she checked the ring footage. She called me at work around midnight. I almost didn't answer because my supervisor gets annoyed when we're on the phone during shift, but something about the way she texted, "Just call me when you can, it's weird," made me step outside. She said Harwick had walked up our driveway at 11:14 p.m., stopped maybe a foot from the front door, and just stood there. No knock, didn't ring the bell. Just stood there facing the door for almost 4 minutes, then turned around and walked back to his house. I watched the clip when I got home. I don't know how to describe watching that. It's not scary like a movie is scary. It's more like when you see something that your brain keeps telling you has a normal explanation, but you can't actually find one. He just stood there, arms at his sides, staring at the door. I talked to him the next day, kept it casual. Said, "Hey, we saw you on our camera the other night. Everything okay?" He laughed. Said our porch light was flickering and he was checking if it was going to go out. Wanted to be a good neighbor, let us know. I wanted to believe that. I really did. Celestine ordered a Wisecam and put it inside, pointing at the living room window. She didn't tell me why exactly. She just said she wanted more coverage. 3 nights later, she showed me new footage. 2 a.m. Harwick, standing at the far edge of his property with what looked like a phone pointed directly at our house. That week, she also found marks in the garden bed under our side window, little indentations in the soil. Same spot, like someone had been standing there, shifting their weight over and over, not once, many times. She called the non-emergency police line. The officer was polite, but basically said it wasn't a crime to stand in your own yard. Nuisance neighbor situation, he said. Not much they could do. So Celestine did what people do now. She Googled him. She found an article from a local Akron paper about 7 years old. Harwick Bellamy had been investigated for voyeurism, a complaint from a previous neighbor. He was never charged. The case just kind of disappeared. She showed me the article on her laptop, and neither of us said anything for a while. I remember the refrigerator was making that humming noise it always makes, and it felt weirdly loud in that moment. We started keeping the blinds shut. All of them. All the time. Celestine moved her desk to a room that didn't face his property. I put extra locks on the doors before I left for work each night. Small things. Dumb things, maybe. But we did them. We still live there. We haven't moved yet because leases are what they are. Harwick still waves at us from the yard. Acts completely normal, smiles. The camera footage from last Tuesday shows him standing at that edge of his property again at 1:47 a.m. Phone up, facing our house. The police already know, they said the same thing again. I don't know what he wants. I don't know how long he's been doing this. I don't know if he did it to the person who lived here before us. I just know that every night when I leave for work, I look back at Celestine standing in the doorway, and I hate that I have to leave. By the time I noticed the same face on our delivery clips for the 6th time, I was sleep deprived and staring too long at every car that rolled past Fernbrook Lane. I live on Fernbrook Lane in Plymouth, Minnesota with my daughter, Nella, who was 16 then and always had one earbud in and one eye on her phone. We ordered from Amazon and DoorDash way too much that fall. I worked weird hours, and by late October, the nights got dark early. The porch light made the front window look yellow and weak. The house was old enough to creak when the heat kicked on, and the basement floor always gave a little pop near the laundry room. The first time I saw the man was in a DoorDash clip. He was just a normal driver in a dark hoodie, handing off tacos, nothing special. A few days later, same face on an Instacart drop. Then Amazon, then DoorDash again. Same guy, same tired look, same white Nissan Altima with a dent above the rear left wheel. Nella laughed and said maybe he worked for everybody. Still, I started noticing him too much. The clips kept coming. 6 deliveries, 6 different companies, 18 days. Every time it was the same Altima, the same dent, the same guy. He never smiled. He never rang the bell twice. He would just walk up, set the bag down, and leave like he hated being there. I told myself I was being stupid. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he needed the money. Maybe Plymouth just had one overworked driver who was always around. On the 19th day, we had no order coming. I was in the kitchen making coffee and trying to find a spoon that was not in the sink. Around dinner, Nella was upstairs blasting music while I folded laundry on the couch. Later that night, I checked the Ring app. I opened the clip from that afternoon and sat there staring. The same white Altima had parked in front of our house. It sat there with the engine running. No one got out, no one knocked. The driver stayed in the car for about 90 seconds, then pulled away slow, like he was looking at the house the whole time. I played it again, then again. The plate was clear enough, so I took a screenshot and drove to the police station the next morning with no makeup on and a bad headache. The officer was polite. He said sitting in a car on a public street was not illegal. He told me to call back if the man came onto the property. I went home angry and embarrassed. That night I put up a second camera on the side of the house, near the narrow yard by the basement window well. I remember stepping on a rake in the dark and nearly yelling like an idiot. Nella thought the whole thing was funny until she saw how serious I was acting. Then she stopped laughing. 4 days later, at 6:12 in the morning, the side camera caught him. He was not in a car this time. He came from the street and cut through the side yard like he already knew the way. He stopped right at the basement window well and bent forward, staring inside. Not for a second. For 40 long seconds. Just standing there with his hands in his pockets, looking into the dark basement. Then he turned and walked back to the street. I called 911 with shaking fingers and kept saying, "He's here, he's right here," even though he was already gone. Nella was awake by then. She came downstairs in socks and asked, "Who the hell is that guy?" I did not have an answer. When the officers arrived, they checked the yard, the basement door, the fence line, all of it. Nothing. No one. A few days after that, police finally tracked the plate. The car was not even registered to him. It belonged to a woman at a different address in St. Paul. The driver had borrowed it. They told me he had been selecting delivery routes by hand, picking our street over and over again. I still do not know why. Maybe he liked the house. Maybe he liked watching the same door. Maybe he thought I would never notice. We moved in January. I still think about that window well whenever I pass a white Altima on the road. Nella does too, but she never says it first. The worst part is how normal it all was at the beginning. a delivery, a porch light, a quick door drop, another night in Plymouth. That is what bothers me now. It never looked like danger. It looked like dinner.